I know it's the afternoon snooze. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good
There we go. To begin this conversation, I want to talk about a conversation that I had 2 years ago, and then one I had earlier this year with the CEOs of Marriott and Hilton. And I asked each of them, and this is 2 years ago, the conversation. We repeated the conversation again earlier this year, and the conversation went like this. How many hotels are you opening up right now? Marriott said, 1 hotel every 16 hours. 1 hotel every 16 hours around the globe. Then I met with the CEO of Hilton. You know what he told me? 1 hotel every 8. Now, we're not talking about construction, we're talking about opening. And I said, okay, tell me where they are, because I didn't know. 2 years ago, they said China. They were building not for the US market, not for the global market, but for the Chinese market. I had a conversation a couple of months ago and asked them how many hotels they're opening up every day, every hour. The numbers didn't change, but the destinations did. And that's what brings us to this conversation right now. And that is 54 countries, 54 cultures, different languages, different governments, of course, different regulations, different rules, different financial tax structures. How do you grow? How do you scale, given the fact that this is a brave new world, which has nowhere to go but up in terms of development? So let's start with the 54 countries. How do you approach them? How do you deal with them? Because it's one thing to use a Western European approach or a US approach. That's not going to work here. So how do you start?
The one thing that we've learned in Europe, and after Choice has really focused in the last 2-3 years on growth internationally, is that we cannot just transplant the model from the US into the European market or into any other international market. So we have adapted our brands and our standards and the way that we approach markets to become flexible and, most importantly, engage with the local partners that know the local culture, that know the local business mentality, know how to conduct business. And that's probably, I get this question all the time, why Africa now and why not 10 years ago? Is we were literally waiting for the right partner, and then luckily we found that with Aniket. We rely on, as a pure franchise company, we rely on the local expertise.
And by the way, Tobias is the head of development for the EMEA for Choice, just so everybody knows.
Thank you.
I had to introduce you properly.
Thank you. So we've learned that we need to be adaptable, we need to be flexible, and we need to get the local input. We cannot just impose what we've done in the past, what works in the US. We know it doesn't work elsewhere. So we are actually working with Aniket in this family, in this team now, to take the blueprints of the brands that we're bringing from Europe, but how do we adapt them and make them flexible and scalable into the African market? And that means simple things as fire life safety is obviously one of them, but energy, sustainability. How do you approach or how do you change operational issues in the front desk, in the front office?
It gets down to not just construction, but basic design.
Exactly. It touches everything. It's design, it's operations, it's build, it's supply chain as well. In Europe, you can say, I want to have these products there, but it may be difficult to get them into Africa or into some of the countries. Maybe in some it's okay, in others no. So this is where we're working, and we're going through this exercise with them now, and that's where we really value that local knowledge that they have from having business operations, not in hospitality, but they know how the challenges are in the markets.
And you had to get re-educated in that regard because you come from a company that's used to doing things at scale.
Yes.
We're going to have this kind of soap, this kind of bathrobe.
Exactly.
And what you find in Africa almost instantaneously is one size doesn't fit all.
Exactly. And not just that, but it's the logistical challenges. Can we even bring these products, even if you try to, or even if they would make sense for the local market, is it even possible to ship them here, for example, because they're produced either in China or whatever? What's the logistical challenges? So this is where we're going through the exercise now, and we will continue this exercise with every new market that we have.
But you call it an exercise.
Well, we're applying it in reality. I
okay.
mean, that's the thing. It's not a theoretical exercise. I mean, we've signed the 3 hotels in Kenya right now, so now we are actually in the phase of designing the brand, the renovation works. We're designing the IT infrastructure that we need to adapt as well. We are designing the operational guidelines. So the good thing is we have a live project, which makes it a bit easier than a theoretical concept.
And these are operational guidelines just for this market.
Yes.
That's the difference.
Yeah, we will see what can be done and copied or transferred to markets that have similarly, but we know that, for example, that like something in Kenya may not work in Nigeria or elsewhere.
Aniket, you're the CEO and owner of the Niti Group. In this partnership, what are you learning about it? Because you're bringing a much more localized approach to it, but you still have things to learn in terms of how do you scale it and do it responsibly.
100%. So thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for the question. So we do business in 18 countries across Africa in a different segment, which is the information technology segment. So we know how the challenges exist in these different African markets in terms of currency, forex depreciation, in terms of investment, security of asset. So we know how the business model works in this part of the market. Now, we are also Choice franchisees in the US market, and I know how Choice operates their business model in the US.
So you knew that before you got it. Okay.
Yes, so we currently have 10 hotels in our portfolio, 5 in the US market, 5 in Africa. And US is to the point like, I want this tile from this vendor with this color code and this scheme, and that doesn't work in Africa. So with Tobias, and we have identified markets where we're expanding the Choice brand, and we're building the brand standard starting with Kenya, and we're building a proof of concept for every country we go into. We just acquired an asset in Kigali, Rwanda, 2 months back. And our vision with Choice is that we're going to be having a proof of concept with our own investment, skin in the game in Africa, to show then the other hotel operators what Choice can bring in Africa.
So each of these hotels becomes an incubator.
Yes.
What's interesting is you picked Kenya first for this. How easy was it for the government to understand what you wanted? Did you get government support? Were there any kind of tax incentives? Were there any other kind of any incentives? I mean, we're living in a world right now, and I'm coming from the US, the big bad T word, we know what it is, tariffs. I mean, you laugh if you will, but it's pretty intense, and it's changing by the hour. How do you grow a hotel? How do you build a hotel when you have no security in those numbers?
In Africa?
In anywhere.
So in essence, you see, every country in the world will always have this changing aspects, and you just have to deal with all metrics that are changing. For example, currently the war is changing our costing in terms of what we're importing. The tariffs in the U.S. also, affected that. But
what has the war stopped you from importing?
Things from China.
From China?
Yeah, because you see, the biggest supply in any hotel industry, if you think about it, is FF&E. And linen and amenities, and the biggest manufacturer is China, and it all goes to the Middle East. Dubai is the hub where everything is moving through, and that's the challenge that we are currently facing when we are developing hotels. We are having that backlog or shipping costs that cost $3,000, now suddenly a container costs $13,000. So how do you manage with those challenges?
If you get the container, considering the supply chain.
Yes, if you get it on time and it moves, yes.
Which means your time to completion just got extended.
Yeah.
Right, and that's just here.
That's just here. I mean, we're lucky in the sense that we're taking over. We're not taking over. We're reflagging existing properties that are operational. So as I said, like we're going through the design exercise, and they're going to be fully refurbished before they're reflagged to our brand. So there's a scale that, like a minimum presence that we're expecting to have them done by end of this year, beginning of next year. So it's a quick turnaround. So it's much better than greenfield or completely new builds. So we don't have too many of these challenges. And obviously, as I said, Aniket has the experience already of the logistical pipeline coming in through his IT business. We will see how that develops in the future when we do start touching on new build projects. But
and that's why you're calling it an exercise. I'm figuring it out.
Exactly. I mean, like literally the other day we were going through like what are all the possible scenarios of who we work with, whether it's an owner-operator, a local owner-operator, an international one, is it an expat owner of a local property, is it a government entity, is there government support, is it managed by Niti, is it franchised through Niti, is it owner-operated, so like this, we came up with this entire like tree of potential scenarios, and for each one of them, we need to come up with different solutions because there are different touch points, there are different challenges that apply. Like, whereas in Europe, We franchise, we have either an owner-operator or a third-party operator that we contract with as a franchisor. Here, it's a lot more complicated. There's a lot more different players out there or stakeholders involved in the deal.
So going back to your tariff idea, how much of your development will be locally sourced? In terms of goods, in terms of hard products, obviously employment, we have that. But in terms of getting it up and running, the good news is it's not a new build, right?
Yep.
So you can move faster.
Yep.
You're not doing one hotel every 8 hours. You're doing 3 hotels to see what happens.
Correct. So obviously, we're completely new to the African market. So we don't yet have the supply chains. And I'm being totally honest, in the US, obviously, as Aniket said, we have a full, like almost an Amazon-style procurement solution. You can go like 360 degrees view or a prototype and say, like, I want to have that bench, that chair, that linen or whatever. We don't have that here. So at the moment, we're just relying and working with Aniket to say, like, these are the quality standards, these are the design languages for the brands that we want to implement and bring to Africa. He's helping us source them. But we've already had this discussion that, like, yeah, it doesn't make sense to bring like the bathroom amenities, for example, just because right now the brand standard says it's brand X coming from Europe somewhere. So does it make sense to have that? Or do we say, like, no, logistics-wise it's much better, or ecologically even, much better to bring that here? So this is, again, something that, like, will follow in the next couple of months to see what's the best way. I mean, we do want to bring, especially for our Ascend collection products, which are going to be like the safari lodges and the more leisure-driven ones, we do place a very big emphasis on ESG, and that there must be a community engagement, there must be a sustainability aspect. And even for the Nairobi products, the other day we were talking about, like, rainwater catchment and for the irrigation of the gardens and all of these things, like, we may not have them written down in the brand standards, but we are looking at how can we engage more and address local issues.
And then, of course, there's just building codes. There's fire safety.
Yes.
Right? Water reclamation and all of that.
Yeah.
You mentioned 18 countries that you're involved in, right?
Yes.
That leaves 36 countries you're not.
Yes.
Of the 18 countries, is there a good example you can share of this was a perfect start to finish experiment with us, where it actually worked because the government got it, the private sector got it, the operator got it?
Yes, I mean, partially. So every
Partially.
Yeah, every country has its unique benefits. So I'll take the recent project that we work in Rwanda. I was shocked because we acquired the asset, and I expected, a land department with really old records of, like, land documents and stuff of that nature. And when
You say the asset was an existing building?
It was an existing building that we acquired, and when I went to the government office, it was all UPI coded, digitized, which doesn't even happen in the US. So there was no title deed, no title search. It was just, you keep a UPI code, you go on the website, and you get exactly who owned the land. You get the entire land history free of cost online at the one-stop Rwanda shop.
And you get it right away.
And you get it right away. And that was shocking, because that doesn't exist also in the US market in different states where we...
It has never existed in the US.
In the US. It exists in Dubai, where it's all digitized because the Middle East is very tech forward. But in Rwanda, in Africa, that was a shocker. Then on the flip end, like countries like Kenya, where we grew up from and where I went to school over here, and when I see the development happening, I left Nairobi in 2012 when I was a student in high school, and then I went to the US for my education, and I came back here. And when I drive through Westlands, I'm shocked. It looks like the CBD. There's skyscrapers coming in, and then that's where the challenges come in. For example, we have a project in Kenya, and water, we used to dig 100 meters for water, now 200 meters, and now 350 meters, and you just don't get water because the city planning starts affecting the way the ecosystem works. A 2-lane road with 20 skyscrapers. So stuff of those infrastructure challenges and risks come in with different countries, but then there are unique benefits. For example, there's more money or more inflow of capital into Kenya than Rwanda. So there are unique benefits and pros and cons of every country in Africa.
Well, you mentioned water, of course, the most essential thing.
Yes.
But you didn't know you had to drill 350 feet originally.
Nope.
Whoops.
Yep. So that was a big, and that's an issue because it's a never-ending pit. Like there'll have to be a more government or a public sector involvement to solve that. It's a bigger problem now than a private sector problem, and that eventually will have to be addressed down the line.
Yeah. Which comes first, the well, the power grid, or the hotel?
Yes.
You better get that one right.
Right. That's true.
Now, flip side, is there a country that you can point to? I don't mind naming names. where you didn't get the cooperation, you didn't get the support, and the project was in jeopardy?
I don't think so. In Africa, I think so. I could probably say that for the US, but in Africa, wherever we have gone, whichever country you have gone to, the government, yes, it's not straightforward like the US where it's all documented in like thousands of pages, but they always work around with you to get a solution. It's one of the best places to invest capital. So I think so. I think so. My experience has been rather positive with Africa. There's always a solution to a problem with the government in Africa. Be it any country, there's always a solution. It might not be straightforward, but there is a solution.
Now, we just did a study in South America. And in South America, up until about 3 months ago, there were two countries that were off limits, right? Venezuela and Paraguay. Now, everybody's developing in Paraguay. Airlines are now flying back to Venezuela, and all the investors are flocking to Venezuela. The danger, of course, is that just happened, right?
Yeah.
You can't really plan long range there yet.
Yeah.
Where can you plan long range here?
I think so. In every African country, if you think about it, the entire world is at war except Africa. It's the only continent which is not affected by, I mean, yes, there are regional conflicts here and there. That's understandable, DRC and Rwanda, and there's regional issues and tensions. But if you look on a grand scheme, it's the only continent where it's unaffected by war. They're pro-business. They're ready to work. So I think so. If you pick any country in Africa, you'll not go wrong. Any country.
Any country.
Any country in Africa. I mean, yes, there are certain regions which I don't want to name where there are conflicts.
I'll name them. No, you can't say any country. Really?
I mean, yes, there are some countries that have challenges where we currently don't operate, but I think...
That proves the point. You can't say any country.
I apologize. There are some countries.
I mean, just thought I'd raise the point. Are you telling us we're out of time? I was just getting to the fun countries. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm being thrown out of here. Please thank Tobias and Aniket.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.